Okay, I think we can get started. Good morning. This is or afternoon or evening, depending on your time zone. This is the weekly VOLTHA TST meeting. And let's see. If anybody has anything they'd like to cover today, feel free to add it in the agenda. It was posted in the chat, obviously, so feel free to add it away if you need to. Okay, so for announcements, we have the ongoing announcement for the V12 Technar that Mitt was working on. And once the content is ready, we'll need to schedule a date and time for that. Has any progress been made on that?
Progress, not to the extent that I can share anything, but from a date perspective, I'm thinking we could do it either in the week of 25th of March or the week of 8th of April. 25th of March or 8th of April. Yeah, either of these 2 weeks we could do it.
Okay,
Yeah, and that would mean that, yeah, we have to have the slide deck ready and everything polished up before that.
We'd also want at least a 3-week lead time to promote it. So just keeping that in mind, if you want to do it at the end of March, that decision should be made this week so that we can make sure that we are promoting it and getting the Zoom set up appropriately. Because I'm not entirely sure what the process would be to set up the Zoom for it within LF. That might take some time to get configured.
Okay, so if that is the case, then 25th is not possible in any case, right?
I would say it would be tough because we would need to get the Zoom set up before we could send out any kind of promotion for it so people can register. And I'm not sure how long that will take. So
let's target 8th of April, right? Then the week of 8th of April.
okay. And I'll look into the Zoom stuff and let you know what I find out.
Sure.
You want to leave that as proposed for the 8th, or
yeah,
that is the date? Okay.
proposed. Yeah.
Good. And just a refresher from last week, if you haven't registered for a Linux Foundation ID, you don't need it right now, but eventually it'll be helpful to be able to access like code repositories and things like that. So if you don't have one, they're free. You can just go ahead and sign up for one. There's no, they can be created for your personal account rather than work account, so you can take it with you. So yeah, if there's any questions, feel free to ask. Okay, so some updates from last week for the Linux Foundation stuff. I posted a few wiki pages last week for like BBSim test failures, and I've also have some pages started for the Jenkins job builder upgrades. I found out after the fact that the personal web pages for Linux Foundation are only visible internally for the Linux Foundation. So I'm in the middle of moving most of that content over to GitHub or whatever wiki server we end up with later on. And in that vein, I'm also going to be putting a request in for a wiki server for wikivoltha.org. Whoops. There are 2 options available. One is to have Linux Foundation hosting, and the other one, Atlassian, is actually providing free open source, free Confluence hosting for open source projects. I found that this is another detail I found out after. Linux Foundation is actually moving away from hosting wiki servers. They're suggesting that projects spin up their instances on the Confluence server. So we're probably going to end up going that route. Unfortunately, let me see this. Yeah, I'll make an announcement once the rest of that stuff, once the server's up and it's available and all that fun stuff. So, so for the BBSim test failures from last week, I did port them over to GitHub. for now, this is just an interim answer. If you visit this link, this is just a literal dump. It's not real pretty, but anything that's failing, showing up with red in the status column, there's a link to the Jenkins job that's failing. Well, maybe not for that one. I've got to, if you ever see this, there's a history maintained for the Jenkins jobs. And if you get enough jobs run through a queue, sometimes some of the older ones get pushed out of the history, which ends up causing this HTTP error to show up. There's actually a link within Jenkins, within the job that if you click on it, it'll say to retain the logs for that job indefinitely. I should have done that for this to retain it. I'll rerun it for status, but basically there's a JIRA ticket open. In this case, there was a memory leak test failure. There's timeouts. There's a whole bunch of stuff in here. All the details are in here. So for the periodic VOLTHA memory leak test, verify ONU groups failed after a minute. There's more detail in the actual task, but they're all in here. And feel free to edit, submit patches to update status if you fix anything. That's pretty much, you can do whatever you want with that. So for the Jenkins, are there any questions about any of the BBSIM failures or this, or would anybody like to see anything different in here? Okay.
Are these the only failing jobs or all of the jobs are there?
Okay, these are just BBSIM jobs. The periodic jobs are the ones that my release
The
jobs.
jobs under the
I'm sorry, what'd you say?
Are those all of the BBSIM tests we have, or these are only the failing ones?
These are the failures I've been digging
Okay.
into. I'm sure there are more failures in there because these were mostly periodic and verify jobs. So they're just the ones that my release jobs happen to be triggering. I'll try and go through and find the rest of them.
No problem.
Okay.
Just okay. So, people here, did anyone has any change to check any of these jobs?
I'll get them checked. We'll go through one by one and see.
Okay, could you indicate on the Slack or wherever you want which one you're checking on? So
Yeah,
if
sure. I'll
anyone else,
assign the defect. I'll assign the
Sorry?
defects so that it'll be easier to track.
Okay. Thank you.
I'll show you a little trick too. If you go into the search bar and type in BBSIM, this will pull them all up. I guess most of them do have periodic in them. But like Docker publish is not in there, the GitHub release job, but this is a really quick way you can find all of the jobs. And yeah, if you right
Also,
click,
I think if you check first under the VOLTHA 2.x test view, then you have all the periodic, daily running BBSIM jobs there. They're not verification, they're test jobs. Yeah, VOLTHA 2.x tests.
2x tests or both?
Yes, 2x tests.
Oh, 2x. Sorry, I thought you were saying
Yes.
2.8.
No,
Okay.
sorry.
No worries. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So just I'll post this and we post this one. I'll refresh the jobs on the GitHub status page too, because it looks like a bunch of those have gone stale. You just have to rerun the jobs and trigger them. Okay, so for the Jenkins job builder upgrade, I'm working through those. There's 4 repositories involved. If you want to see the change sets that are going in, these links in here will bring you right to them. There's few interdependencies within the 4 repositories. I'm trying to track some of those down. But for global JJB, which is the main repository, we've been updated to version 57.3. LF Common Packer, we're up to we're up to 57.3. We need to get up around 90, so we're quite a bit behind on that one. LF Common Packer is up at 0.7.6. So version 0.80 has a built-in blocker. Oh, sorry, this isn't the one. There's some job edits that I need to go look and see because there was handling for the builder that we use for AWS. There's some syntax that was changed in the config files. I need to see if we're actually using this before we can update. LF Ansible, last patch was checked in 2018, so we're up to date with that one. LF Tools is going to be a little bit of a problem right now. We've been updated to 0.37.4. 0.37.7 has a blocker built in. This patch removes support for some of the older Python versions. So we're going to have to upgrade the interpreter, which is going to affect VOLTHA docs and, well, not directly, but VOLTHA docs is affected, but this is very likely going to affect the robot testing harness. And the robot testing harness has a built-in dependency. There was a custom tarball that was added that froze some of the packages for the robot testing framework. We're going to have to dismantle all of that stuff before we can do this upgrade for Jenkins, but just FYI, that's in the mix. Does anybody have any questions about any of this? I'm basically, the approach I'm taking is I'm finding which packages, which of the 4 repositories have non-conflicting packages, doing upgrades, then running a bunch of Jenkins pipeline jobs to verify that nothing's broken. And, from the change logs, figuring out if we have dependencies like this Python upgrade, and, we'll just deal with them in turn. And I'll open tickets for all this stuff too, as we go along. I am submitting, you might see code review requests. If you'd like to review them, feel free. Those are always in the queue. Okay, so I guess the floor is open for any discussion items if anybody would like to bring anything up. I've got a bunch of stuff later on, but if there's any projects or features or anything being worked on, if anybody'd like to cover them. Okay, so we can keep going. Nobody's put in any code review requests, so that's good. Okay, I did a brain dump this morning of some to-do items that are going to need to be worked on in the near future. The first one, I've got the TST meeting from last week. I need to get in and download the meeting video and upload that to YouTube so it's visible. It's not there right now, but I'll go fix that after the meeting. We need to do some general triage on the Jira tickets that are open. They're all over the map. Some are release related, some are feature related testing, so we'll need to, review them, close whatever we can. Any that need to be decorated for like testing or for BBSim. If anybody wants to work on them, assign them to yourself, all that good stuff. Just an FYI, I have 2 scripts that I've been using that construct JCL queries for both Garrett and for Jira to query for like patches that people are making code review requests on. Open patches, you can search for strings. And the same thing for Jira, you can search for open and closed records assigned to you. Oh, excuse me. Jira tickets with text descriptions, with labels, with attributes, whatever. It's basically a query generator. Um, it is usable, but there's a lot of rough edges on it. I'd like to get that cleaned up and, make the repositories available so people can start using them at the very least, so we can start putting queries directly in the TST agenda pages, so we can make it a little bit easier to track all this stuff. For just general build and test items, we need to go in and start removing the or true conditionals. And I know I've mentioned this a couple of times, but some of the test suites have or true suffixed on the ends of commands, which basically masks the return status. Need to start removing those to allow tests to start failing and commands to start failing, and go in and resolve them, so we have a good foundation to work from. VGC generally, we need some infrastructure changes. We need to upgrade the version of Golang being used so we can deploy the VGC functionality. That also is going to require updating Docker images, so we're using the new version of Golang. That's one of the to-do items coming. Python, we need to do the interpreter upgrades. I mentioned that earlier. So that potentially is going to affect documentation generation and the robot testing harness, and we need to remove the custom tarball. One side note for VOLTHA docs. What was it? The site Read the Docs has built-in support for Sphinx generated documentation. So we may be able to get rid of our server dependent. We'll still have docs.voltha.org, but we may be able to remove the piece that we're currently doing to generate the documentation. Read the Docs, I want to say they support for open source projects. There's no cost for it. And basically they set up monitors on their site that watch the repositories. So when you check code in, it gets magically regenerated at the time of check-in, rather than what we have right now where you have to go in and merge patches before the documentation. Or sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. We have a delay after patches are merged. It's an overnight delay, sometimes before content will be published. This would allow documentation changes once they're code reviewed and merged to be visible on docs.voltha.org immediately, rather than having the delay we currently have right now. And the last item, I've mentioned this before, a repository exists, ONF make. This is a repository of makefiles and makefile targets and some logic. It's mostly generic. And the intent was to refactor all of the makefiles we have in the different VOLTHA repositories, drop them into a central repository so we have consistent behavior of targets and features. Since the release is out the door, I'm going to start looking into adding this as a Git submodule in like both the documentation generation and a few other places, and start deploying the common pieces out. So we can remove some of the code that's in the individual repositories. Okay, so I know that's a long brain dump. Does anybody have any questions or anything they want to add, or anything for this list? Okay, well, so we can open up the floor again, because that's all I have for this week for this agenda, for this TST update. Would anybody like? Okay, go ahead.
So we have one proto change for the on-demand statistics for at the OLT level and ONT level. So I'll share the proto file changes in the Slack, so anyone can chime in and provide the feedback. Probably in the next TST, if at all there are any questions, we can take that up.
Okay, good.
It's still a bit work in progress. So once that's done, we'll share.
Okay. Good. With that, okay, the floor is still open if anybody has anything else they'd like to add. Just do a quick. Did we miss anything? Okay, I guess with that, we can give you back half an hour in your day today. Okay, great. Thanks for joining.
Thank you for
Thanks
joining.
for
Yep.
Bye-bye.